Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, let's be real for a second. Have you ever had this amazing, brilliant new classroom strategy that just kind of fizzled out? Well, today we're going to break down a 5-step cycle that's designed to make those changes actually stick.
You know, it's a question so many of us have asked ourselves. You get this fantastic new idea, you're all fired up to try it out, but then a few weeks later, poof, it's like it never even happened. Everything just snaps back to the way it was. So what gives? Why does that happen?
Well, a huge piece of the puzzle is time. A lot of the time, we just give up too soon. The research is pretty clear on this. It takes at least 6 to 8 weeks of consistent practice before you start seeing real, sustainable improvements. Change just doesn't happen overnight, you know? So what this really tells us is that the key isn't some magic bullet strategy. It's all about having a solid process. That's where implementation planning comes in. It gives us a framework, a structure that shifts us away from just trying random things and hoping they work to a real cycle of continuous improvement. And here it is. This is the cycle we're talking about. 5 super clear steps that take those great intentions and turn them into real, lasting change. Assess, plan, implement, monitor, and refine. See? It's a loop that just keeps building on itself. So, you ready? Let's dive into step 1.
All right, first up, step 1, assess. Think of this as your reconnaissance mission. It's all about gathering intel before you make a single move. Because, let's face it, you can't fix what you don't understand. You need a really clear picture of what's actually happening in your classroom right now.
And getting that clear picture requires this really important balance. On one side, you've got your teacher gut, that professional instinct, that feeling about what's working and what isn't. And that is so important. But you have to pair that gut feeling with cold, hard, objective data. That's how you see the whole story. Okay, so how do you get that whole story? Well, here are 4 really powerful ways to do it. First, just some honest self-reflection. Really look at your own practices. Second, collect that objective data we talked about. You could count disruptions or time how long transitions take. Third, and this one is huge, ask your students. Giving them a voice gives you incredible insights, plus it gets them bought in. And finally, bring in a trusted colleague to observe. A fresh pair of eyes can spot things you'd never see on your own. Okay, so you've done your homework, you've gathered all this awesome data, now we can move on to step 2, create a focused plan. This is where all that assessment work really pays off. It's the foundation for building a really smart, targeted strategy. And the absolute key word here is focus. I know it's so tempting to see all the things you want to change and try to tackle them all at once, but trust me, that is a recipe for disaster. Instead, you've got to pick just 2 or 3 specific strategies to work on. That's it. This keeps you from getting totally overwhelmed and actually makes it possible to be consistent. And this is a perfect example of what a truly focused goal looks like. You're not just saying, I want to get better at transitions. That's way too vague. Nope, it's got to be specific, measurable, and have a deadline. Like this. Reduce transition time from an average of 4 minutes down to 1 to 2 minutes, and do it within 3 weeks. See the difference? Now that is a goal you can actually track and achieve. Okay, we have assessed, we have planned, now it's time for step 3, implement. This is the action phase. This is where the rubber meets the road and where consistency is, without a doubt, everything. And you need to keep these 2 words front and center. Fidelity and consistency. They're your new best friends. Fidelity just means you're doing the strategy exactly the way you plan to, no shortcuts. And consistency means you're doing it the same way, every single time, with every student. If you don't have both of those, even the most brilliant plan is just going to fall apart.
And here's a classic mistake. You can't just announce a new rule and expect everyone to get it. It doesn't work that way. For any new routine to actually stick, you have to explicitly teach it. That means going through this whole sequence. First, you explain the what, the why, and the how. Then you model it yourself. Then you give them a chance to practice with your help. You give them specific feedback. And then you let them fly on their own.
And don't forget to support this whole process. Put up visual aids, like posters with the new procedure. They're awesome reminders for everybody. Keep hammering home that consistent application we talked about. And, finally, gradually hand over the reins. The end goal here is for your students to take ownership, to start monitoring themselves. Okay, now we get to close the loop. You've put your plan into action, but how do you know if it's actually working? That's what brings us to the final connected steps, monitor and refine. This is where you check your progress and make smart adjustments based on what the data is telling you.
Yep, we're going right back to the data.
You have to be systematic about this to see if your plan is having the effect you wanted. I mean, look at this chart. It's a perfect example. You can see this huge drop in disruptions from week 1 to week 6. That's not just a gut feeling anymore, right? That is visible, concrete proof that what you're doing is actually working.
But what if the data shows something isn't working? Well, you don't just throw the whole plan in the trash. No way. You become a detective. You refine it. This quote is a fantastic example. Let's say your data shows morning transitions are awesome, but the afternoon ones are still a total slog. The data is telling you to look closer. Maybe your students are just wiped out by them. So you make a tiny, targeted tweak, like adding a quick energizer right before that transition. That one small adjustment could solve the whole problem without scrapping everything you've worked for.
And honestly, this might be the most powerful idea of all. Great classroom management isn't some destination you just arrive at one day. It's not a one-and-done fix. It's a continuous cycle of improvement. Once you refine your plan, the whole cycle just starts over. You assess the new reality, you set new goals, and you just keep growing as a professional. It never really stops. Ultimately, that's what this 5-step cycle is all about. It empowers you. It helps you move from just guessing to actually knowing what works in your classroom. It puts you in the driver's seat of your own professional growth. So, I'll leave you with a final thought, a little challenge. What's one small piece of data you could start collecting in your classroom tomorrow to kick off your own cycle of improvement?